I started feeling that what my job has become is a professional copy paster. And so then ultimately, like where I pulled the plug was the Voluntary Exit program. Then as you serve yourself, it actually like kind of divides the world, right, into the people who get that and then the people who don't get that. For the first time in my life, I started thinking, ooh, I have something to lose, right? I was only 15 when I came to the United States alone.
Something else I talk about in the book is how we've lost care in the name of efficiency.
And so we use these words for machines, and then we use words that are much more like machinery centric for human beings. So my thesis was on how mice navigate the world. I can't give up on like the dream just to take like something lesser.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Wide Worldview podcast, where we do relatable journeys of relatable people who fought relatable fights. I'm Anil Didan. I used to be a behavioral researcher with Google for over 11 years. I now build emotionally sustainable careers through personal and social insight. I have a book coming out in February called Burnout Highway. And today on the episode, I have with me a dear friend of mine, Kira Rich, who's had an amazing journey all the way from the Czech Republic to Australia to the US. I'm so excited to get into all of that. Kira and I worked together at Google on the same team and worked on some of the most fulfilling work I think I've done in the corporate
100%.
world has happened with Kira. But before we go into that, Kira, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to set the scene?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here. I think we're going to have an amazing conversation. I think we both have led very unconventional lives.
Yep.
And I think that's what kind of brought us together as friends. And yeah, I'm really excited for like what the future holds for both of us. For everyone listening, I'm Kira. I'm originally from the Czech Republic, and I found my way somehow to New York. Right now, we're sitting in beautiful financial district. And the journey all the way here was definitely eventful. I think we're going to get into it. But yeah, a lot of like my past is really around like switching what I was passionate about, both from my education, which led me first to the United States, and then to the UK, as well as my career, which led me all over the world. I worked with Google for 12 years across Europe, Australia, United States, and have recently quit. And I'm probably on the best journey of my life, and I'm really excited what the unknown has in store for me.
Thank you. I want to start where it all started. So what was it like growing up in Czech society? It's a very fascinating society from the outside. I've been there a couple of times and I loved it. Prague, I think, is my favorite city in the world. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about what it was like growing up as a Czech kid. What framed you?
Yeah, I was born in 1991, which is a very interesting period in the Czech Republic. My mom actually waited to have a child until the Berlin Wall fell and until, she felt like we lived in a free society because she didn't want to have a child in the regime and in the system that was there before. And I think that kind of marks like the Czech Republic and Czech society and Czech people in turn is sort of this reserve that a lot of people have because we've been like under the rule of like various, powerful nations.
Yeah.
For many, many years. And so when I was growing up in the Czech Republic, it felt there was definitely like some like timidity, right? We were still like establishing who we are as a nation, also like recently split off from Slovakia into, the Czech Republic and Slovak Republic. And I think like the notion of what it means to be Czech was really evolving fast. However, there's also this like very, very deep traditions that go all the way back to like Bohemia, and sort of like the Slavic nature. Yeah. So for me, I think the struggle that I had and why I wanted to leave the Czech Republic so young. I was only 15 when I came to the United States alone. And I think the struggle that I had was that there's sort of this like layer of sameness, or I think that's how I felt back then. It's a very homogeneous society.
Okay.
What I meant by that is like not just in terms of race, but really in terms of ideas. There was sort of like one way to be successful, one way, one path to take, from education to work and then to your family life. And that was kind of how success was defined. And I think I felt very stifled in a sense that I could almost like project in front of me, this is what my life's going to look like, like it felt very defined. And I think that the definition felt somewhat scary. It felt like, is this all there is?
Why do Czech people think like that? Why is there some, is that pragmatism? Like one path, where does that stem from, you think?
It's a good question. I think pragmatism is like definitely a key like core value for Czechs. But I think it's also like this idea of like you don't really want to stand out too much in any area. So you kind of want to be like, pretty good at a lot of things.
Yeah.
And like when you start like excelling too much, it's sort of like, it's almost like you're drawing too much attention to yourself and like taking attention away from the collective. So I think there's sort of this like collectivist nature, especially in school, I would say. And I think like pragmatism really comes also just from like everything that people went through, right? So the kind of like common sense, like things that were like true before, continue to be true is something that's like people really believe in the Czech Republic, kind of like following the path that like your grandparents followed, your parents followed. There's not a lot of like challenging the status quo necessarily, as long as it like leads to, good quality of life and kind of like what we would define as sort of the, like the mellow life. There's like a Czech word for it that's really hard to define in English, but I think a lot of people have this aspiration for pohodový život. And what that means is that, everything's sort of fine, like everything's going well, you have enough money to enjoy the hobbies that you like. You don't necessarily love your job, but you also don't hate your job, and the job provides like enough stimulation, but not too much challenge. And I think that makes sense when you look at some of the like tragedy and wars and occupation that, our ancestors went through.
Yeah.
Sort of their idea, or like aspiration was pretty much just like, I just want like...
Don't get noticed. And,
exactly.
Just
an easy life.
Let
me live my life. Exactly. And so there's definitely some like fear that I think like kids, not just me, but all kids kind of had in, expressing their individual interests and their creativity and who they are in such a rigid school system.
Sounds like the opposite of, the American exceptionalism that you live in right now. So, it's like you've gone to the absolute opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Talk to me a bit more about school.
So school was really interesting for me because I actually moved quite a bit within education, even early education in the Czech Republic. I started kindergarten in Prague, where I was born, but then one of my mom's big dreams was we had this summer house, I guess I would call it, back out in the countryside. And she really wanted to renovate that place because it was part of like our ancestors and, the valley that it comes in. It's just like absolutely beautiful, very different than like, the busy street of Prague. And so she moved our family out there and went through all of the renovations, which means I started school actually in like the nearest village, which has like 150 occupants, like inhabitants. So it was very, very small, right? Not at all cosmopolitan, very religious, which is also quite interesting because Czech Republic in general is a very atheist country. And obviously like the fact that like we came from Prague, like that was already very different. that my mom like used to drive me to school, like, you know, in like a pretty nice car. Like that was, you know, kind of crazy. So I feel like I didn't really make a lot of friends when I started school. And so I kind of just turned to books, and I was always quite a bookish person anyway, and very independent. So all throughout like the 3 years that I was there, I feel like a lot of my education kind of happened very independently. And then my grandmother got cancer, so we relocated the family back to Prague because of better hospitals. And so I started in a different school, felt very different, felt much more structured, felt like I couldn't really afford doing this, like not paying attention, because suddenly there's like a school system that like really cares, right? It's not just like a small village school that kind of didn't care, and you know, they were fine because I knew enough. And I found the structure to be really difficult for me. I think the transition was hard because my mom was so preoccupied with my grandmother, and sort of her, and, you know, her passing away eventually. So I felt very kind of alone and like left to my own devices. And that's kind of when I had like a lot of these big like realizations of like, what do I actually want to be doing? Like, what is interesting to me in school? Is school as a system interesting to me? I missed a lot of school because my mom wanted to spend a lot of time with me. So we would travel a lot. I remember like when I was reading books that I really loved and I just like wanted to finish the book, I could always persuade my mom, like, you know, to write me a note that I'm sick and I didn't go to school. So
sounds like a cool mom.
so it was, yeah, I feel like, again, a lot of my education was very like ad hoc. And I think the other part of Czech nature is like not necessarily not respecting authority, but having like a kind of a, you know, some distance from authority, or sort of not feeling like you need to like respect a teacher just because they're a teacher, or respect an adult just because they're an adult, or because they're telling you like, you know, this is what's in the books, like this is what you should know. And so I think for me that kind of sparked a lot of like internal conflict, because the things that I wanted to learn about wasn't something that like we were necessarily doing in school. And then what we were doing in school, I found very rigid and, you know, kind of boring, to be honest. And so eventually I attended something that we call a gymnasium, so like a lyceum in French, which is, you know, it takes like 4 years from your kind of secondary education and then 4 years of high school, and it's, you know, put together into an 8-year education. And the whole idea is that it's like a prep for college. So you study like 14 different subjects for 8 years. It's very like intensive. So I was enrolled in that, and that felt a little bit better because at the very least I had much broader scope of like the subjects that I wanted to study. But again, like didn't really fill me with the depth that I wanted to get to. And I started kind of thinking that, and I think we touched on that, this idea that, okay, I can literally see the path in front of me. Like I will do the like 6 more years of this school, then I will go to college, then I will have this job. Like it felt very predictable. And I think the predictability was what like really scared me. It felt like life is so small. If I can like foresee, you know, if I can predict the next 30 years, it feels very limited. And that's when I started looking around me for like, what are the other possibilities? I know this is a long story, but back then a lot of like European kids were going to the United States for this 1 year at US high school. And the whole idea was to improve their English. So during all of this research, I discover even better, hey, there's these private boarding high schools in the United States, something that like I, as a Czech kid, like had literally never heard about, right? It's a private school, so the education is, much more individualized. In some cases better, you could argue. And the next thing that was an obstacle was that this was in March. And I think, as like US people know, March is the deadline for all of these applications for these schools. So I missed the deadline, but I'm like, whatever, like deadline is made up, right? So I literally write an email to, I think it was like 100 schools. I didn't care which schools at this point. I just copied the admission emails of the admission office emails and sent them all an email, put them in BCC, of course. And lo and behold, like 60 out of the 100 wrote back to me and said, hey, this is our application, fill it out and let's see where this goes. And so then I went through the schools. I picked out, I really had 2 schools, one in Vermont, one in Wisconsin. The one in Wisconsin was my number one favorite. It was in the middle of nowhere. And their whole philosophy was about experiential learning. So learn by doing. And so I was very, very inclined on that school. And lo and behold, I apply. I had to get, recommendations. A lot of my teachers didn't speak English. So I had to sit down with them and they would dictate the recommendation in Czech and I would translate it into English in my bad English. And one other shocking thing that happened is that the school in Vermont, they accepted me and they gave me a full ride scholarship that came with 5 days to decide if I'm accepting it or not. And I sat on it and my mom was just so excited for me. And I told my mom, I'm like, I will have to decline because I haven't heard from the school in Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
And that's the one. That's, I already envisioned myself there. And so I remember my mom was like, what are you doing? This is the biggest opportunity of your life and you're saying no to it. But I think already then I had a very deep inclination of what I want is out there. I can't give up on the dream just to take something lesser. Right? And if I've already gotten this far and I don't get into the school in Wisconsin, that's fine. Then there's another path, right? Then there will be a different path and that's totally fine. But I have to put it all on this one thing. Wow. And I did get in. I did get a scholarship. I did have to pay. It wasn't a full ride scholarship, but I took out loans. I went and it was, the best experience of my life.
Yeah, so let's talk about your education seems like it already has the experience of full life, So after all these amazing experiences, love to talk about how you ended up in Google and what was the journey from there on.
Mm-hmm. So after St. John's, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I figured, I'm good enough at the academic game. And I think that's one of the other fallacies that we have in modern world. When you are pretty good at school, there's sort of an assumption that you continue with school. You sort of get funneled into the master's or the PhD. And so it kind of felt okay, maybe that's the path, but I wasn't very sure about it. And so I did apply to PhD programs, but again, I wanted to experience something different. So I sort of knew what that would look like in the US, but I looked back to Europe and only applied to Oxford, Cambridge, and UCL, and that's it. Back then, as I was kind of reflecting on all of my education at St. John's, I felt, what ties it all together to me is human consciousness. Every single thing that I've studied, from classical music to languages to science to mathematics to literature, it's a kind of an output of human consciousness, but also studying human consciousness. very much like a lot of the topics and themes, right, about the world, how the world works, how a human being is part of that world and at the same time observing the world. I was very fascinated in quantum mechanics back then. So I applied to Oxford to study neural networks, actually, at the Department of Theoretical Neuroscience. So back then, or for folks who don't know as much about the field, neural networks is really the kind of underpinning or the foundation of LLMs, large language models, which is then the underpinning and the foundation for a lot of the breakthroughs in AI that we have today. And so that was actually really fascinating, like going to Oxford, studying a very like theoretical, very analytical, like rigorous area where we're trying to define consciousness in actually a very limited sense. So my thesis was on how mice navigate the world and navigate mazes. Because navigation is actually really interesting. Mice are born with specific type of cells in their brain called place cells or grid cells. And they help them sort of like see the environment almost like a third person observer. So they already see it kind of from up above in 3D and understand like where certain things are located in the environment. Even when they are born and they are blind. And then they use their whiskers to kind of confirm a lot of that knowledge. And so there was a lot of like thought in the discipline, you know, if we can basically synthesize, right, this navigational understanding into a computational model, and then we can give this computational model to things like robots. Could they navigate much better in like disaster zones, like after an earthquake when there aren't a lot of markers, right, for human rescuers to find where buildings used to be or where survivors might be?
What place does Google and, like working across 3 cultures, what did that give you? What were some of the culture shocks? What did you love about it?
Yeah, I think my path to Google was very similar to what we discussed with education, where I felt, oh, it's the exact opposite of what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
So why not try it? I don't know much about business, right? I just spent many years studying philosophy and being in academia. So I believe I was like approached to apply to Google. So I said, why not? Sounds interesting. And back then the application process was for like a new graduate program. So it was in the global business organization. And you didn't necessarily know like which role you were applying for, because the idea was you rotate.
Same. So college placements, right?
College placement. Yeah. So you would rotate through like multiple roles as part of the sales organization. So I'm like, great, like even better. I will learn like, a couple of different things. At the same time, I believe it was like the same year that Google actually acquired DeepMind.
Okay,
so I was like, great. And I guess like in my mind, I imagined something very, very different than what the job ended up being. Even in the interviews, like the questions, they were actually quite strategic or quite philosophical, very much kind of like macro level questions.
Yeah.
So I guess I imagined that the job was going to be almost like a consultant a little bit. However, I arrived first day in Ireland for the training of the new cohort, and I realized very quickly that my idea was totally off, just totally off. I mean, they started us with like learning AdWords.
Yeah.
So of course the role ultimately ended up being an account strategist helping small and medium businesses with their ads accounts.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning I felt like, okay, like I'm learning quite a bit. Yeah. So I found it interesting. But I knew honestly from day one that, this is not really for me, because it definitely feels like very limiting. And then especially when I, after the training, like sat at my desk, and this is kind of when the like reality came in, because my supervisor came in and they're like, okay, so like this is your phone, and this is your headset, and you know this is the routine of how you're gonna work. And I literally had to kind of ask like, wait, so like I'm answering the phone calls like in a call center? And they're like, yep, like that's like exactly what the nature of this job is. Like you basically receive calls, you're on a call duty. If you need to go to the bathroom, you need to announce it to your entire team.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, and like put yourself, right, put the phone on like, on standby or whatever. And you have like 5 minutes, right? So you have a 5-minute bathroom break, and then you need to come back and like re-log in and all of that. And I was just like, no way, like no way. Like for a second, I really thought, right, that this is a joke. And I think this also shows you just kind of the darker side of my education journey, because it really felt like a huge ivory tower, right? Because I think this kind of a job is a reality to many, many people. Yeah. But for me, I was like, whoa, like I'm in a call center and I have a 5-minute bathroom break. And my job turned out to be like a lot of advertisers basically yelling at me because they were not getting the results, or, they felt like they were wasting their money, or they felt like, Google has very global policies. Yeah. So it was very eye-opening. And I think this is where to this day, I don't really know why I didn't quit. But I think I felt, hey, ultimately you wanted these different experiences. Ultimately you wanted to understand the world more. Yeah. And so why not, you know? So I kind of felt very different than in academia, where suddenly I had this like responsibility or duty where it was a one-on-one interaction. Yeah. And I really liked this feeling of, hey, like this is the person that they got to. This is the like unnamed person that they reached at the end of the phone call. Yeah. And I could actually do something. I could help them. I could, even when it came to the policies, like the one really good work that I was proud of that I did was like fighting some of the policies that just didn't make sense in the Czech Republic. So for example, the word recipe is basically a prescription from a doctor. And so there was a lot of confusion with like ads kind of getting disapproved and pharma policies and things like that, and healthcare advertising. And, in a corporation like Google, it does take a long time to kind of write up a proposal and explain why this policy doesn't make sense for the small market of the Czech Republic, right? And so I very quickly applied for a more technical work that was in Australia, and that was an amazing thing with Google. I mean, you've done that as well, where, one of the perks of working for this global corporation is that you have access to a lot of these, jobs and roles and learnings and people all around the world. So I felt like I want to take, kind of as much out of Google as they take out of me, and really
and that's
like
a very
apply
pragmatic way
for
of
that.
thinking about your career and loyalty in general. Like your company demands loyalty, however, your loyalty first should be towards yourself, right? Like, and when you understand some of the incentives of how a company works, so it's important to put yourself first in that context as well. So I think it's a very pragmatic way of thinking about it. I want to talk about, you were talking about Australia and Google, but you've done Ireland, Australia, the US. Talk to me about what you learned from some of these cultures, especially working in those cultures, or were there elements of culture shock for you that you were like, oh, that's crazy?
I think in like all of these places, honestly, there was some culture shock. Yeah, Ireland not so much because I was there only like 6-8 weeks or so for the training.
Yeah.
Then I was stationed in Poland, and so Poland was interesting because you would think, oh, like similar history to the Czech Republic, so it might be quite similar. But I actually feel like I had the biggest culture shock in Poland. It's a much more religious country, so. For example, getting birth control was a whole thing. Even though like Google, was sponsoring these like private doctors that could speak English for the Google staff, so you wouldn't think that you would get into some situations. But like first time going to the doctor and trying to get a prescription prescribed. They basically told me no. I was like, what do you mean no? I was like, that's not possible for you to say no. So that was quite interesting. And I think Poland was, it's quite like interesting when you have countries that are very similar to each other. Like I'm sure you have that in India as well. And like they have kind of some similar history, even the language is quite similar, but like, you really just feel the differences. Like that's kind of how I felt, that it's like because it's so similar, all you can focus on are the differences. So for me, I felt like I just like felt very kind of a fish out of the water there a little bit. And also because it was the first job after college, like there was just a very strong like expat culture with Google that felt very like collegiate, but not necessarily something that like I was, that interested in. I felt like I've kind of done that. And I wanted to like, do more, learn more. So the choice of Australia wasn't like super thought out.
Another experience.
It was just, I've never been there. It was pretty much
I moved to Singapore like that. And I'd never been there until I landed there for a job.
Same, I'm like, sounds interesting. Like people have great stories about Australia. Like this job sounds interesting. Let's try it. So that was also really cool. I really enjoyed Sydney. I think some of the culture shock there is that like you really don't realize how at the end of the world it is. It's truly so far removed.
Everywhere, time zone, distance,
everything.
That's why I was like, I'm not going further east of Singapore.
Oh really?
I didn't
so you had the same.
I was watching Champions League games at 3 a.m. That was enough. Like I didn't want to do it at 4:30 a.m.
Right. Yeah. But like even within Australia, right? Like it's a huge continent. So like for you to like just cross Australia in a plane, that's like 5-6 hours. And then like to go like to mainland Asia, it's like another 3 hours. And so in that sense, I felt like, wow, you're really isolated from like the world news. Things just like don't really reach you there. And in some sense, that's
as a Czech person, did you enjoy that?
I'm like, in some sense, that was nice. You're kind of like, you can live the pohodový život, right? You can live the comfortable life. And I think it really is the place where you can have a very like amazing, comfortable life. And I think also in the state of New South Wales, there's a lot of, just like everything's very orderly, like to a point that is like quite shocking.
I felt that in Singapore, especially after being from India. I was just like, what is... I needed some chaos. That was one of the reasons I left Singapore. I was just like, I can't deal with so much.
One experience that I remember that was shocking to a Czech person is like, we went to a New Year's Eve party, right? And like you always see the fireworks on TV because Australia is one of the first ones, right? That welcomes New Year's Eve. They're huge. They're massive. It's like incredible, right? So, we saw that and we're like, wow, this is, amazing. Like the parties must be like out of this world. And so the fireworks ended and then suddenly you have like police everywhere and they're like, all right, like that's the end, like go home. And yes, everybody got in a line and they kind of like very, like kind of almost like silently walked like on the streets, like escorted, right? Like by the police, and like nobody even had a boombox and like played some music, like nothing. right? Like it was very eerie.
Fireworks and out.
Yeah, it was very much like, wow, like what is happening, you know? And so like these kind of experiences, I was like, okay, like that's very interesting. It's very foreign because you go to Prague for New Year's Eve and there's like kids in the streets, like setting off like illegal fireworks and, you know, like escaping from police and like everybody's kind of just like living life, I guess. And so I felt like I didn't feel that like that zest, that like that danger almost, or that, you know, that like possibility, right? If everything is so ordered, where is the possibility?
Yeah, makes sense. That's super interesting, and I think it's really, and it's one of the things I valued from my time at Google as well was the opportunity to move around the world and just experience so many different cultures, people, and learn the good and the bad things from all of these different cultures, right? And something can be good for you and bad for somebody else, and you know, like
100%.
And I think that learning is important at your own level. And you know, good thing I did because we met after your Australia stint when you moved to New York. But you've recently moved out of Google, and in this economy, that's a pretty bold move, as most people would think it's a pretty bold move. So what triggered that move out, and what are you up to now?
Yeah, so as I was at Google, every time I changed jobs, I always found something that I felt like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. I would love to learn more about this. Yeah. And so I went from, the account strategist to kind of a technical role in Australia to then a creative role, like working with creative agencies in Copenhagen and in Northern Europe, to then New York, where I worked in Human Truths with you, more as like a strategist and data analyst and coming up with consumer insights, to marketing in New York. And in marketing, I started in a more like partner organization because I felt that was really interesting, like partnerships, business development. So I worked on Android, working directly with some of the manufacturers of Android phones, especially the ones from China. So like Xiaomi, Oppo, OnePlus. So again, super interesting, like learning kind of the like Chinese way of business and learning the massive scale at which they operate. And then after that, I switched to XR, extended reality. So working on a lot of like emerging tech, 0 to 1 products, on the platform side, as well as like headsets and most recently AI glasses. And I felt that that role was really, the best role that I had at Google. I have immense passion for technology that kind of was always there throughout my life. I loved working on like the 0 to 1 emerging tech category because it's very experiential learning, right? There's not really a lot of playbooks. So it really felt like this, like a full circle. Like I felt in this role, I had such a ownership and possibility to shape the, not just the product, but the industry. I was able to work on like real big, category defining launches, which I think is very rare at Google nowadays, since it's much more mature as a company. And so after all of this, I kind of like looked around, and I think
what else?
yeah, we kind of talked about it. Like, I feel like you and I had like, an alert, right? Every Monday, like what are the new roles in the company that we would be potentially interested in. And yeah, like as I was going through these roles, I'm like, actually, like I'm good, like I don't see another role that would be like as intriguing or as different from everything else that I've done at Google. I think I just also matured as an individual, because in the beginning you kind of, yes, you are discovering your values, but you also kind of go with the flow, or you want to be helpful and useful, and you're still learning about like who you are as a person, or what is it that you really care about. And I think for the last like 3 or 4 years, I sort of started crystallizing that. And I knew that that's, going to take me out of Google. And so then ultimately, like where I pulled the plug was the voluntary exit program, which is also interesting because I've like debated with myself, about leaving Google, but felt a little bit uncertain. And that's not really a feeling I have often, as you maybe have seen. And I think the uncertainty just came from like the pressure of like a financially stable life.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I felt a sense of shame almost to say that a financially stable life is actually like that important that it like dictates my decisions, because that's really not been the case before, right? And so for the first time in my life, I started thinking, ooh, I have something to lose, right? I have something to lose if I just leave and I don't have something set up.
Yeah.
And like the paycheck stops coming in. Yeah. Like, right, I'm going to lose my apartment. I'm going to lose my kind of livelihood in the United States. I'm going to lose, a sense of self, because for a long time I put like my entirety of myself into my job because I loved it so much.
Yeah. Identity got linked to that, right?
Exactly.
I relate to that.
Yeah. So that's I think what kept me for actually longer than I maybe wanted to, because I was afraid. I was afraid of like, what does life look like at the other side? And yes, I had some savings, but it didn't feel
enough.
It didn't feel enough, and it didn't feel like, oh, I have this brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Let me just go work on it. So I think like when I remember the day, like when the email came and I read it, and I just knew, like in my core, like in my heart, right? Like the feeling that I had was like elation. It was this feeling of like surprise, elation, freedom, like feeling like so full of joy. And so like as a person, I knew that I wanted to take it.
Yeah.
So I spent those 2 months trying to convince myself not to do it. So I sought out people who left Google or were part of one of the layoffs, asked them questions like how did they feel about it, what their life looked like. I spoke to people who left Google and rejoined Google, right? Yeah. Because they realized like, actually, like this is not for me. I want to come back. And so I got a lot of different opinions, but the whole idea of that was to try to, be rational about it, because I think every fiber in my heart was like, I 100% need to take this. Yeah. So I really tried to convince myself like, hey, let me find the people who say don't do it.
Balanced
evaluation. And for what it's worth, I really did not find a balanced evaluation. Every single person that I spoke to, even the people who joined Google back, said that the time away and the time like thinking about different things, spending more time, with friends, family, their community, doing, things that they maybe put on a back burner, like that, it was just invaluable.
That's a really big change in your life. And were there elements of, I've been writing on burnout, and I know everyone feels in the corporate world, the burnout is often masked with things like, I need a new challenge, or, I'm ready to try something new. Were there elements of exhaustion or jadedness that drove you, to that decision? And was there something big picture that was driving that sense of exhaustion?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was definitely burnt out. And for me, like burnt out really comes from like two things. Like one is this dichotomy that's like very apparent in corporate world, where you feel like so much stuff is on you, right? All of these like decisions and like tasks, and yet you don't have the power to like actually, move the machine. And so like a lot of what you have to do is kind of like manage, right? With influence and not real managing reporting lines. You have to, kind of like beg other people to help you do the task that you're doing. So I feel this kind of cycle of like having a lot on your shoulders. And then at the same time having like very little direct power to do anything about it. Just felt very exhausting. And I think Google has also changed like over the years. Like it's much more conservative company right now. Like there's, everything that we do, like especially in like product and product marketing, is reviewed by so many stakeholders. These people have very different opinions, right? There isn't like a top-down decision tree, but it's also the structure of the company is not really conducive to bottoms-up innovation. And I really cared about like, if you're in any job, like 9 to 5, or like in my case, 9 to 9, I wanted these hours to mean something. And so I think ultimately like my biggest problem was how much I cared. Because it was really hard to get things approved, accomplished, move through. And then of course, like any big idea, right, gets cut by all of the different stakeholders into kind of the average mold. And then that's what ships. And so I think that was like one part of the burnout for me, was like being in that environment. And then the second part was like I am a person who really deeply cares about things. And I think in the context of a corporate life, that is often a crutch. It really doesn't help you, because you really need to like shut things off, and very often like it's not your fault, or if things don't launch, like it's not on you. But I felt that the only way that I can turn this amount of care into something that feels joyful and meaningful and fulfilling and valuable and still represents me as a person is if I do something on my own. And so I kind of knew that for me, like that's not really possible to do in a corporate setting. And so as I'm trying to do that, I think that's what like eventually led to burnout. Yeah.
Interesting. I think people get burnt out because they feel this, and not just in the corporate world, in life in general as well. When you feel a lack of agency over your own life or your choices or your day to day, I think that really drives that sense of burnout, where I don't have agency over what I'm doing or what the outcome of this piece of work is, even though I'm spending 9 to 9 on that. And also something else I talk about in the book is how we've lost care in the name of efficiency. So that's another thing that just like a lot of us are this hamster on the wheel, especially more and more with like this output driven thing and outputs have become so easy with AI as well. And, with AI being integrated more and more into corporate workflows, but there is value in doing something with care over the long term. Like, for example, with my investments, I have this very detailed spreadsheet through which I manage all my investments and stuff. And I was showing this to a friend who was in the corporate world the other day, and he was like, this is really cool, but you can do this quickly with this and that. And I'm like, I know I can do this, but if I do it this way, I take more care with my, and I know my portfolio better, for example, right? And I know there are those other solutions, but sometimes you should choose care over efficiency, right? So that you can actually be enriched by that experience as well, and not just try to get through it as quickly as possible, right?
Yeah, I love what you said about care over efficiency, because that was like one of my pet peeves is when I started noticing in big tech, there's this language that has been adopted where more and more we use like human words to describe what like machines do, right? So like, oh, AI creates, right? Or we say like, oh, like the computer like has died, right? Like it's died on me. And so we use these words for machines, and then we use words that are much more like machinery centric for human beings. So like people say, oh, I'm going on vacation to recharge. Or they say, you know, oh, like let's double click into this theme. Right. And so like I started noticing a lot of these in like corporate lingo and in how people even refer to themselves. And it really like stroked something in me, because it felt, you know, more and more the language of efficiency I feel applies to machines or applies to processes, right? That can be shortened, optimized, etc. But when you start applying the language of efficiency to human beings, like what does it mean to be an optimized human being? What does it mean to be like efficient at, you know, at your morning routine? Like when you really think about it, right? Like I'm like, I don't actually like understand what does it mean? Like what is the point of it to be efficient? Because to me, it's like, okay, so if you're faster, does it mean that you're faster? If you're faster at your morning routine, like what is the goal? Right? Or
why?
Exactly? Because to your point, right? The care doesn't ever really come from efficiency. And I think efficiency can only come like when somebody or something has put a lot of care into the system, right? Because the system now has all of these different parts, and only then can you kind of start optimizing or cutting away the parts that are, you know, not as efficient. But in the beginning, like somebody had to put all these parts together. So I feel like that's the other part, I guess, of burnout that I felt at Google. I don't want to be glib, but this was literally the last couple of months of my job was, there was, you know, we had to provide more outputs, right? But after all of the layoffs, Google did not really rehire as many people. And I think you see that in general in big tech. There's less people, but the same amount of work or more. There's less budget. So even for hiring contractors or agencies, you know, you have a lot less to work with, but the demands are same or greater. So the demand for more output was there. And then, of course, the demand to use AI, which I am completely fine with. Like, I see AI as a tool that can actually like help make the tasks efficient that are meant to be efficient. But where I got to in my role, because there was just so much that needed to be done, is that let's say I would need to do like new messaging, or we're creating a campaign proposal. So I need to create the brief for the campaign. And that's actually the work that I loved doing, right? Because in and of itself, that's creative work. But because there were so many meetings and I didn't have time, that was the task that I would outsource to Gemini or to the AI, right? So I would spend time, write a really nice, prompt, get the stuff back. I would quickly check it, that it looks good. And I had like very optimized like AI system so that it sounds like me. And then I would copy that output, put it into a document and send the document to all the reviewers, right, that need to see it. Now, these people don't have time either. They're in 700 other meetings. So they get this email from Kira, open it, they're like, oh my God, 5-page document.
Summarize it.
So they copy the document, put it to Gemini, and then don't even ask it to summarize it. I think if they are like efficient human beings or efficient workers, they just ask AI, like, as a senior director in product management, review this messaging from Kira, right? And provide like strategic and functional recommendations, right? Blah, blah, blah. And so then it generates some output, because again, they also set up their AI systems well. So the output's pretty good. They copy that output, send it back to me in an email, right? And so then I receive these. And then again, I'm like, I don't have time to read this. So let me copy this from the email, add it to the AI and be like, as a senior product marketing manager, like reply to these like comments, with strategic poise and blah, 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 and like showcasing these exact attributes. And so then I get the output, and then again, I go and like copy the output and like send it in an email. And so basically this just shows you that I started feeling that what my job has become is a professional copy paster, because the only thing that the AI couldn't do today is just talk to each other. So actually all that we've become is like the people who have to copy paste, right? In between the documents and the emails and the comments and slide decks and things like that. Yeah. And so I felt very like creatively exhausted. And the fact that I had like no time to really think about that creative output was, it sort of made me think. It made me think like I want to be more human. And right now, if I'm doing this copy paste thing, I feel like a machine.
Yeah, that's super fascinating to me, that, the way you put it, that you left the corporate world to be more human. So now that you're out, what next? What bikes are you going to ride, and what are you hoping to creatively stimulate in yourself, and what's the journey ahead?
Let me think about this, how I would answer this. I think I want to shed a lot of the biases and a lot of the kind of expectations that I put on myself. Like I almost want to return as much as possible to the inner child that I had in me. Just try things, right? Like imagine like I'm back in the playground. And in fact, I am in New York City. Yeah. Like I'm in the biggest playground in the world. Yeah. And treat it like that. Treat it like, there's just so many possibilities for meeting new people, borrowing their toys, understanding how they see the world, help them build their castles, invite them, to borrow my toys. I wanna kind of like get more into the mindset of playfulness and humor, which I feel like I lost kind of along the way, almost like by design. In order to be very successful at Google, I sort of had to shed some of those qualities. And that's like not to disparage the success, because I still feel very, very proud of what I accomplished at Google. Yeah, I think it's like every experience that you've taken, right, like gets you here. Yeah. And that's what's important. Yeah. It's less about like the exact experience. It's more about like the holistic journey. Because at the end of the day, like you don't really even remember, right, like every single thing that happened to your life. Yeah. But it's sort of the culmination of that is like what you are now, who you are, and how you can continue exploring it. Yeah. So I want to feel like proud of that journey. Like at Google, ultimately, what I was really proud about is like figuring out the system. And so like to me, that is what I want to remember, is like that's the success. And that's what I got out of it. And it's less about like, okay, I had these roles, or, now I have these skills and I want to utilize these skills. So I feel like what I've given myself through Google is like kind of cracking the system in a sense, or understanding how the system works. Yeah. And that's something that I want to apply, to whatever I do next. But in the meantime, it's really more like a playground.
You're experimenting again.
I'm experimenting. I actually have to like fight the urge to like attach myself to something, because there's so many ideas that I have. Like that's actually like one of the crazy things. Like I'm very abundant with ideas. Yeah. And so I almost have to hold myself back, because I don't want to like get myself into a path very, very quickly.
Yeah, and in this economy, it's also so easy to execute a lot of ideas. Like I don't think we've ever been in a world where running a solo business is as easy as it is today with AI and the internet economy, and whether it's drop shipping to anything that you want to do, like this podcast, for example, right? And I tried so many things after my layoff. And that was so fascinating where, I, for the first time in 11 years, I had this open state of mind where, I would just I could let the world come back to me, so to speak. That numbness would go away, that I didn't have to be down this path. I didn't have to care about that next level, I could care about something more real or more authentic to me. So through, were there people that you relied on through, so one thing I talk about in this book is that no one else understands your day-to-day context better than, the people around you. And I think we are also sitting here because we, I think, relied on that. Like when we worked together, we relied on each other for that. But I think especially in the US, there's this work me, life me thing, which I think creates this distance sometimes from your coworkers, or finding mutual vulnerability and then empowerment through that in your burnout or exhaustion or things that you may not like. So is that something you relate to? What was the role of people that you worked with in your career, especially when it got tough, times of exhaustion or tiredness or busyness even?
Yeah, I always try to be as real as possible at work, sometimes to my detriment, I feel.
I feel the same.
Just because, to your point, I saw that dichotomy, and I think that's where Europeans often or at least Czechs, they look at the US and they're like, oh, it's so fake in the US, right? There's this a forced upon joy or kind of corporate fun, the mandatory fun that we always make fun of.
Yeah.
And so I think I've always tried to retain some of that realness. And to be honest, I think it's something that at the end of the day, that's what brought me the relationships that I have. And it also very clearly showed me who just sees that as abrasive, or who sees that as that's not really part of the corporate culture, right? Yeah. And so I don't want to associate with that. And so I think one of my kind of aha moments that I had is I can really only serve myself, and then as you serve yourself, it actually kind of divides the world, right, into the people who get that and then the people who don't get that. Yeah. And then that's great for you because now it's much clearer who you should hang out with, or who can bring abundance and ideas and kind of life to your life. So that's how I always felt if I applied for a role and I didn't get it, or any kind of rejection, I'm great, I am so happy because I trust that person, that they know what they need for their team. And as they met me in the interview and I was just myself, and they decided, hey, this is not the kind of person we need. I'm so happy that I didn't get the role because I would probably be miserable in it. Right. So I think for me, it's always been about those connections, and ultimately, even when I was leaving, there were people who reached out to me that I haven't spoken to in many, many years, from all the different parts at Google. Yeah. And we still related to each other, right? Really, really well, because the friendship was built on a foundation of who we are as people, right? I think it's more vulnerability, this idea that you're vulnerable with who you are, you kind of lay it out there. You're not afraid of
who you are.
Exactly. And you're not afraid. You're vulnerable with what you don't know, what you do know, what interests you have, even if they're stupid interests or whatever, right? You're sort of vulnerable and comfortable in your own skin. I feel and I actually wanted to read that when I left, or actually I think even before I left, but when I already applied for the exit and I knew that there's going to be this year of exploration, I just started writing down what are the sort of things that I would love to do. Like,
Oh, wow.
I can send you
That's
this.
a long list.
That's just like half of it, but I can
Yeah.
send you this. And I just want to read some of it so you
Yeah,
kind
of
of
course.
understand what I mean by like confidence or ambition or like
Yeah.
limitless potential.
Yeah.
So I started with make enough money to feel fully free. Then take singing lessons so I am at least average. Write a novel and get it published. Learn Italian. Learn Mandarin.
Wow.
Become an owner either of a business or multiple businesses.
Yeah.
Become an actress in at least 3 movies.
Oh, wow.
Learn how to DJ and mix music. Write a modern opera. Hire a personal chef. Ride horses regularly. Fully renovate the summer house where we used to live. Commission a painting of my grandmom and mom.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Plant an oak tree. Launch a non-alcoholic spirits brand. Become a patron of the arts. Sponsor a scholarship program for kids to learn philosophy. Be great at skiing, kite surfing, diving, and horseback riding. Learn card tricks and magic. Learn to fly a plane.
Wow.
Learn how to play chess and win a poker tournament.
You know you have one life, right?
So that's the stuff that I was just like, oh, these would be cool. And so I think it's like, right, like a lot of these things that I just read out, like they could also just be like the list of what like an 8-year-old writes, like what they want to be when they grow up.
Inner child.
Yeah.
It's very important.
And I don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
I feel like if you lose that, then you might as well just be the Gemini gem, or like, you might as well
Artificial.
be the AI agent.
Yeah. Why is this mindset of trying to ride all these bikes, even if some of those bikes are just for fun, they're not like gonna end up in any sort of like monetary goal or anything like that? Why is it important to have that sort of mindset, especially in today's times?
I think it's like rediscovering what makes us human. Like at work, for example, right? You sort of have this like forced community in a sense where, yes, you're with these people. You didn't really decide these people, right? You didn't decide them to be your friends or to be like sat next to you. And then you go and you sort of like get to know them as people. And I feel like those are kind of the conversations that are the things that really like stick with me. And then even in a corporate world, like when you have those conversations with people, suddenly the work itself becomes so much more meaningful. There's more humor in it. There's more, relatedness in it. There's more inside jokes. There's more like patterns that you see in what you're doing. Yeah. And I think we talked a little bit about that before. I actually think it's quite interesting that, I do think that we're going in that direction. But it's very similar to me, like how we think about art, right? So when you see a beautiful painting and you're shocked at the price, you're like, wow, this is $100,000. Like, how is that possible? How can it be $100,000, right? This painting only took like 20 hours to paint. But you don't realize that what you're actually paying for is the entire life of the artist. Yeah. And sometimes the life of their mother and their father and their ancestors. It's all of the knowledge, it's all of the life lessons that they've accumulated, the years in art school, how they see the world, their philosophy, the books they read, right? Like all of that ultimately culminates in this one painting. And so that's kind of the value, right, that you're actually buying or that's there. And that's their representation of like, this is me, this is who I am. And I feel very similarly about like riding all of these bicycles. Like, yes, today you don't know yet where it all culminates, And that's the fun part of it, right? Like that's exactly what I want.
Exactly.
If I knew where I'm going to be in 30 years, then that's not a life that I want to live. I want to not know. I like the uncertainty. And so it's even more important in that uncertainty to have all of these bikes to kind of rely on that they bring you a more holistic perspective, or open new doors, or open new relationships, or just bring you to different areas that you otherwise wouldn't see.
And practically, it's also a hedge against what's happening with jobs in the corporate world, and the lack of jobs, especially for young people. That or the more you invest in your personal skills and your diversity of skills and interests, those are, who knows, those could be like, you could probably open up a hostel somewhere, like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, that's what we're even discussing now, right? That, yeah, like AI could probably take a lot of the work that I was doing at Google in a corporate world, but like, can it take the work of a kite surfing instructor? Can it take the work of a plumber? Can it take the work of, a fashion stylist that like literally spends his hours scouring all the vintage stores in New York to like find a piece from the 30s, right? That's like perfect for the look that he's imagining, right? Like, I don't think so. And so I think like we're going actually back to that age where while AI is getting more and more and more efficient, it's not getting, it doesn't have more care. And so we as humans, right, anything that we put the care into, those are the areas that I would say, one, are more fulfilling to us by design, by how we were built as people, but they're also the ones that are really monetizable and are, can lead to a life that has much more meaning and purpose.
Yeah. Being human is going to be monetizable more and more in the world we're going.
Yeah, I can't wait. Like that's my retirement plan. That, like as self-driving cars are just gonna take over.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to be like, have a little amusement park where kids come to learn how to drive stick shift. In the streets of Prague. That will be what I'll be doing. It'll be like, try this ancient art of driving stick shift in in this beautiful old car.
Yeah. As we end this, I want you to maybe leave the audience with, what your wide world view is. Like, what is the key to building a long, nimble career in an emotionally sustainable manner?
I think it all comes back to really knowing yourself. So there's never just one advice, right, that works for everyone. So you have to know yourself. And in order to know yourself, the easiest way, I think, is by just doing more. And I know that sounds very counterintuitive when you're already in a mindset of like, oh my God, I'm so burned out. I have so many tasks at work and, life feels overwhelming. Like there's so many steps to cooking a dinner and getting groceries and paying bills. What I mean by doing more is doing like little experiments. But I actually did that like a couple of times at Google, where I would be like, okay, so today maybe I will try to like use AI for every single thing. And let's just see like how that works. Like, is it helpful? Is it not helpful? So even for like an email that literally requires a reply of like, yes, sure, I will go and use AI, right? And like basically see how that feels. So I think like even at work, you could like find a way to do some of these experiments just to learn more about like what you need and what fuels you. Because it took me like many, many years to even be able to say like, this is the work that I enjoy, this is not what I enjoy. And I even think that even that dichotomy is kind of like weird because, I would say like most people, there's never something that you like never enjoy. It also happens, it also, has to do with the context, like how you woke up. Do you have the energy for it today, right? So there's just like a lot of things that will never really give you the blueprint for like, okay, like this is the perfect job or this is my perfect life. Yeah. You just kind of have to continue to experiment, see what feels good. And you can only do that if you're doing. So less like strategizing, less planning for it, less thinking about, well, if I didn't have this job, what else would I do? Less like creating manifestos and, like 700 plans of like what this could be. Actually, my psychologist was amazing in telling me, I remember I had like one problem, I forget what it was. And she's like, well, what do you think is the first thing you should do? And I'm like, oh, I guess I should like read a book about it, right? And she's like, Kira, you already know, like you know enough, like that's actually like totally your avoidance is by just going and reading about it or going and watching YouTube videos about
Formulaic.
it. Exactly. Very formulaic, right? Like, have you actually done anything at all? Have you tried anything, right? And then taken stock of like, okay, was that good? Was that bad? Did you learn something? Did you not, right? Yeah. So I feel like today, like, I would just want to encourage people that, yes, I love, right? I love reading books. I love watching YouTube videos. I love absorbing knowledge, but nothing comes close to just doing more and paying attention to how it feels.
Yeah. Can't ride a bike without riding a bike.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a perfect example. If you asked almost any single child after they try riding a bike for the first time, I think they would say, I'm afraid, this is horrible, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm ashamed, I don't want to fall, right? It would be all of those like anxious feelings. And so that's a perfect parable because that's how it feels to all of us doing anything new. Yeah. So how do you get over that hump and continue trying?
Yeah. So that's been fascinating. I mean, I could keep going, but we've been talking for about 3 hours. So I don't want to make this, you're just fresh out of the corporate world. I don't want to make this a long meeting that you just can't wait to mute. Can't wait to end. Yeah, you can't mute this meeting since it's a live meeting. But I just want to thank you for, doing this. People like you and so many other people I've worked with have been the fuel for, the things I'm trying to do. And your journey is very, very inspirational to me. And I hope, it is to whoever is listening here as well. And I think it's a journey that shows what can be achieved if you just trust yourself, have some confidence, and are willing to experiment and feel. Thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And everybody, I'm Anmol. That's Kira. We'll link our LinkedIns and stuff so you can see, what we've been up to in life. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. And Burnout Highway is the book. wideworldview.com is this website. I work with people one-on-one as well. So if you're interested in exploring a career transition or are exhausted, that's something I can help with. So do reach out through wideworldview.com. And thank you so much again, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.